So we're like 3 weeks into 2025 at this point, and in 2024 we had our final seasons of 3 Star Trek shows. Season 5 of both Lower Decks and Discovery were the final seasons of those shows. Then the second season of Star Trek Discovery likely being the final season for that one as well. To be honest, it's a little disheartening because it felt like 4 years ago we were in this brand new era of Star Trek where we had so much stuff coming out, like so many shows in development and in the pipeline and stuff like that. Like we were almost going to have a constant stream of Star Trek shows, and it kind of felt like the plan for Paramount Plus was that they wanted to have 52 weeks of Star Trek. Like as soon as one show ended, the next show would start the very following week. It felt like that for a while. Unfortunately, Paramount Plus seems to have overextended themselves and not realized that what their budgets are and what their money is. And maybe, unfortunately, Star Trek shows weren't doing as well as they expected them to. But Paramount Plus, they've kind of ended those 3 shows last year. Discovery wrote and filmed almost their entire 5th season, thinking that they were getting a 6th season, and then found out during the filming, I think it was, of the very final episode that they weren't going to get a 6th season. So they had to really quickly film this extra 30 minutes to kind of close out the whole show. Lower Decks seemed to be in a slightly different situation where they definitely would have kept going if they could have and if they were allowed to, but the most of the final season seems to have been written and kind of planned to be a final season outside of that. Now there is some rumblings about the people involved in Lower Decks that they're trying to get a live action sort of version of the show going off with sort of like a workplace comedy sort of vibe, which that could be really fun. We've never had like a live action Star Trek comedy before, so it'd be cool to see what that is. Prodigy though is just such a tragic story in my opinion, because it was a genuinely fantastic show. I was in love with the 2 seasons of Prodigy, but it unfortunately just seemed to never have found an audience. After season 1, it was cancelled by Paramount Plus, just flat out said, it's cancelled, you're not going forward. Season 2 was already mostly done, so they just shopped season 2 to Netflix, who then aired it this summer. And I don't know, even the release of Prodigy season 2 was weird, because apparently there were some deals with European countries where, like France, for example, they got to release Prodigy just whenever they wanted. So France got the rights to Prodigy and released it months before it actually came out on Netflix, which may have harmed the viewership ratings for Prodigy when it finally launched on Netflix in the United States and the rest of the world. But unfortunately, this does seem like Prodigy is not getting a 3rd season either. It hasn't been officially cancelled yet, but I feel like with Netflix, they probably would have renewed it by now if it was going to be going forward with another season. That doesn't seem to be the case. But that's all in the past now. We're looking forward to this year into 2025. And our first piece of Star Trek coming out this year actually comes out in less than a week on this Friday upcoming, which will be the 14th Star Trek film. The first Star Trek film we've had since Beyond came out in 2016. The first Star Trek film to be set in the prime timeline since Nemesis came out in 2002. And that is Star Trek Section 31, which will be the first Star Trek film ever to be released on just streaming. It doesn't seem to be getting any sort of theatrical release, which sort of signals the era we're in now where, you know, cinemas and theaters and stuff, they're still important, but movies are much more likely and will much more often launch on just streaming services now than they would have just released in cinemas like they used to do. So it kind of shows that we're in the 2020s now for Star Trek with their film. It's kind of coming out on that. This will also be the first Star Trek film too, as far as we know, not featuring Enterprise as the main ship, or even really a Starfleet crew outside of one character. And the film is landing on Paramount Plus this Friday, the 24th of January. It's written by Craig Sweeney, who worked on Star Trek Discovery during the show's first season. It's directed by Olatunde Osunsami, who directed a variety of Discovery during from seasons 1 to 5. They directed episodes throughout the whole run of the show, pretty much. They also directed Calypso, which, I don't know, in my opinion, I feel like Calypso was one of the more visually interesting Star Trek things we've gotten of the new era. So that might signal kind of the what Section 31 is going to look like when we're watching it, which is kind of exciting. The music is being done by Jeff Russo, who was the main composer on Star Trek Discovery, and the film is suspected to take place in the Lost Era or the early 24th century, probably around the 2320s, following Michelle Yeoh's Philipa Georgiou as she gets up to Section 31 shenanigans and Section 31 spy shit, with a varied cast of characters. One of those characters is Casey Roll, who's playing Rachel Garrett, who was captain of the USS Enterprise C during the Next Generation's iconic episode Yesterday's Enterprise. I made a trailer breakdown back in December, and to be honest, my feelings haven't really changed since making that video. I'm intrigued in the film. I'm really interested in what they're going to do to make this feel like a film and not just a longer episode of Discovery. But if we're being real, I think it probably will just feel like an extended Discovery episode, just going off of the crew involved, since a lot of them were majorly part of Discovery's run. Being written by Sweeney, who hasn't worked on Discovery since season 1, that probably tells us what to expect with the character of Philipa and like what's going to inform the choices that they make in the film, because she was at her most villainous in the later episodes of season 1, so it's possible that the character in Section 31 here will have more in common with the later episodes of season 1 than the more anti-hero version we saw in seasons 2 and 3. The film will also include some flashbacks to Philipa, how she came to be, who she is, which makes a lot of sense since a lot of season 1 was set in the Mirror universe, so it tracks with the writer on board being somebody who was involved in the show during those episodes. Now, the movie was originally a show that didn't really get anywhere for years, so I hope that the story in the film doesn't just feel like it's a bunch of episodes of a show taken and repurposed to create a film narrative, because that normally they've done that before. Apparently Moana 2 recently was that. I haven't seen the film, but I heard it was similar to that, where it was supposed to be a TV show changed into a movie, and you can kind of tell with the movie that it's kind of just episodes of a show stitched together. I hope that's not the case here with the narrative, where it feels like this could have been like a long 2-parter pilot for a TV show. But to be honest with you, I'm not crazy about the idea of the first thing to bring Star Trek back in films being this, because it just kind of feels so far different to what we should expect from a Star Trek film. This feels like a Star Trek version of The Suicide Squad or Mission Impossible, which, as good as those ideas are on their own, they're not really Star Trek. Now, we don't have an exact date for this next one, but sometime this summer we will be seeing the return of Star Trek Strange New Worlds with the show's 3rd season. Season 1 came out in May 2022, and Season 2 came out in June of 2023. Season 4 is already in pre-production, so we can rest assured the show will not be cancelled after this season, but just going off of the release dates of the other 2 seasons, we can probably make an educated guess that Season 3 will start releasing in either May or June of this year. It's a big year for TV, honestly. A lot of big shows are returning this year. A lot of great shows releasing in just the first half of the year alone. But season 3 will be 10 episodes like the first 2. It was one of the shows that writing and production was slightly affected by all of the SAG-AFTRA strikes in 2023, which is probably what pushed the show out from getting a 2024 release date to getting a 2025 release date. Now, I'm not sure how accurate this is, but some sources are saying that Martin Quinn, who played Scotty in the season 2 finale, is actually going to be a main character in season 3, which would be awesome and is just another slight step into the original series era and keeps the tradition going of a Strange New Worlds season final, introducing an iconic member of the original series cast to then have them be a bigger part of the following season. Along with this, we have Cillian O'Sullivan joining the cast as Roger Corby. Roger was featured in the original series briefly as somebody who had died before the show took place. He was the fiancé of Christine Chapel, who is a character on the show, and he came back as an android in the original series episode, What Are Little Girls Made Of? He was also referenced a few times in Strange New Worlds Season 2, setting him up for his appearance in Season 3. I love when shows do that. I love when you get little teases in one season about somebody showing up in the following season. It makes the show really fun on rewatch, because then when you go back, you can notice all these little things and be like, oh cool, look, they're talking about them here before they show up in a few episodes. That's always really fun to me. Along with Cillian, we also have Rhys Darby joining the cast in an as of yet unknown role. All we know is that he will be playing a recognizable Trek character, so that's really exciting. There's a lot of theories on who he's going to play. Some people are saying he's going to be a Dax, which that'd be awesome. I would love to see that. Outside of this, the season has been described as being genre hopping, with every episode being episodic and focusing on a different genre. This is pretty similar to what the show has already been so far. Apparently episode 4 is going to be a murder mystery episode. But yeah, the show has been doing this the whole time, with every episode trying to do something different and interesting. I'm really excited to see Strange New Worlds, honestly. It's still easily my favorite Star Trek of the new era of Star Trek. I think every episode is at least very enjoyable, with a lot of the episodes being some of my favorite TV of the last 5 years. The next show is very possibly going to end up in 2026, but I'm including it here anyway because I personally feel like late 2025 might be doable. But Star Trek Starfleet Academy is finally happening as a show after years and years of them trying to get it made. I feel like 2025 is likely just because of the fact that for the first time since Discovery Season 2, Strange New Worlds will be the only Star Trek show of the year. And I feel like Paramount's current plan is to at least have 2 shows a year. It's not, the 4 or 5 shows we would have had, but 2 shows is probably what their goal is right now. The problem with that, though, is that I really doubt Strange New Worlds Season 4 would be ready for a 2026 release date. So if Starfleet Academy comes out late this year, they probably won't have their second season ready for 2026 either. So if Starfleet Academy came out this year, that leaves a pretty sizable gap in Paramount's release schedule for next year, and they might prefer to have if they can't have any Star Trek next year, at least have 1 show this year, 1 show next year. But Starfleet Academy has been a proposed Star Trek project since the late 1960s. Since the original series was popular, there were talks about a Starfleet Academy show that would focus on younger versions of the Enterprise crew, and then every decade they'd bring the project out of some form of the shelf and just try and redo it. I remember before they could get Undiscovered Country or Generations off the ground, there were talks about just doing a Starfleet Academy movie. And then in the early 2000s, there was talk about that too. It's been a constant thing where they've always trying to get it working. And then it went into proper development when the new era of Star Trek started. There were like a load of projects listed that they wanted to make. One was like a con show, and Starfleet Academy was one they seemed to be most happy with. And so they're pushing it forward. It's already renewed for season 2. It'll be 10 episodes, and it'll be set in the 32nd century, shortly after Star Trek Discovery Season 5 ended. In terms of the cast for it, Tig Notaro is returning as Jet Reno from Star Trek Discovery. Robert Picardo is returning as a version of the EMH Doctor from Voyager. I'm personally hoping he's playing the same EMH from Voyager's episode Living Witness, because that would tie in really well, and also at the end of that episode, the Doctor would have returned to the Earth around the time of the 30th century. On top of this, we'll have Mary Wiseman returning as Sylvia Tilly from Discovery, and Oded Fehr returning as Charles Vance from Discovery. We're also getting Holly Hunter and Paul Giamatti coming onto the show, with it speculated that Giamatti's going to be playing the villain or the antagonist style character of the show. And then Tatiana Maslany is also going to be in the show. She was great in She-Hulk back in 2022. I know she was really popular in another show that I'm blanking on, where she played multiple characters that I need to get to, because I heard she's just fantastic in that. I actually am pretty excited for Starfleet Academy. While I'm not super crazy about the 32nd century being the setting, I personally think maybe the 25th century, around the time Picard, would have been more interesting. But I think that the cast of the show is pretty damn stacked. Like, a lot of big people are involved in this show, and it feels like they're really aiming for this to kind of be the new next generation, in a sense that this is meant to bring in a next generation or a new generation of fans. Same way like when Next Generation came out in the 80s, it was supposed to sort of modernize Star Trek and bring in a lot of new fans who might not have been in love with the original series. But like Starfleet Academy is meant to sort of appeal to people who might not have been Star Trek fans before and are looking at this show and going, that looks really interesting. They come on to this show, they watch it, they love it, they go back and revisit the other stuff. Because we got that big article last year where they talked about kind of the future of Star Trek and the changing fans, and how Star Trek unfortunately isn't really a fan base that is getting younger, that they're not doing a good job at bringing new people on board, which of course you have to focus on the existing fans and make something that they love. But a fan base isn't going to last if it's not growing and if it's not bringing on new people. And I think Starfleet Academy is meant to be that, where it's supposed to bring on new people and get younger fans interested in the franchise, which I think that makes perfect sense. And if we want Star Trek to last, that's what needs to happen. But I think this is kind of what Trek needs right now. Bringing in some new blood, real looks into the future and what this franchise will be going forward. I think there's big enough names and there's big enough importance being placed on this show that they'll really try and make something special and something that a lot of people will want to tune into weekly. Like, they want this to be kind of a big show people are talking about. There are no other Star Trek TV shows in development besides these ones in terms of official greenlit development. Like, we talked about that Lower Decks workplace comedy kind of thing, but that's not been greenlit yet. These are the only shows that are like officially getting made. And while we have a couple other film ideas bouncing around, it doesn't seem like any of them are going to be nearly ready enough to film or even finish writing in 2025. So there'll definitely be no other films besides Section 31 this year. But I think this lineup is really, really fun and exciting. Obviously, we'll have to see in terms of where quality is concerned and hope things are good, but I'm excited to see what we get. Anyway, how are you feeling about Star Trek in 2025? What are you most looking forward to? Let me know. And if you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe. If you're not, then a like and a share is always really appreciated. Thanks so much for watching. Have an amazing day.